Welcome back. Now, an increasing number of leaders around the world, even Ban Ki-moon, have been critical of Israel's latest bombardment of Gaza. And this was even before the latest incident where shells rained down on a Palestinian hospital, killing 4 people, including doctors. It's not a public relations war that Israel seems to care too much about right now, or indeed seems to be winning. Let's discuss the world's response. I'm joined in the studio here in Singapore by Professor Peter Sluglet, who's visiting research professor at the Middle East Institute of the National University of Singapore. And Moshe Koppel is a professor at Bar-Ilan University and joins us from Jerusalem. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us. Peter, if I can begin with you. There's an awful lot more chatter around this event than there seems to have been during Cast Lead or the operation in 2010, whose name I forget, Protection, I can't remember that one, but there's Pillar of Defense was the one. There seems to be now a lot of people on the streets in cities around the world, a lot of talk on the social media, and a growing sense that this is a media war that Israel, usually masters of this, are not doing so well in.
The Israelis do seem to be losing the propaganda battle, and I think this is probably because of greater access on the ground to TV cameras and so forth, and to, you know, the plight of the Palestinians is more visible to the rest of the world than in previous operations, perhaps. I mean, we haven't yet climbed to the giddy heights of the operation, I think it's Cast Lead 2008 to 9, where about 1,100 to 1,400 people were killed, but it's getting there. And I think maybe the rest of the world is beginning to wonder how on earth this can be justified.
Moshe Koppel, let me come to you. I mean, to a certain extent, Israel is not playing its hand as well as it has in the past either. We've had an increasing number of senior politicians and senior figures in civil society making openly hostile, in some cases genocidal comments. The Prime Minister himself has described the Palestinian victims as being posed telegenic victims in this situation. A lot of criticism being leveled over there. How do you think this is going?
Well, we're fighting for our lives over here. The propaganda war is important, but it's of secondary importance. You've got to understand the situation. Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip in 2005 completely. It left flourishing greenhouses there that the Palestinians could have used for to grow the economy. Instead, they tore down those greenhouses and used the materials as rockets against Israel. They got billions of dollars in aid, and they used those billions of dollars to build tunnels in order to tunnel into Israel to do terrorist attacks. Israel only now has discovered that there are possibly as many as 100 of these tunnels going from Gaza into Israel. So while the propaganda war is important, we're fighting for our lives here.
Well, I mean, you say that, but this is all part of the problem, isn't it? The propaganda war, to a certain extent, includes what you've just told me. This line that Israel is fighting for its life is patently unbelievable to most of the world now, given the immense disparity of power between the two sides. Nobody's buying that line, and this is perhaps the reason why the criticism is coming down so strong, isn't it?
Look, all of the criticism is hypocritical. There have been 130,000 people killed in Syria in the last couple of years alone. You don't hear a thing about it. France has taken over Mali and other countries in Africa. Great Britain bombed Libya. You don't hear anything about any of these things. You only hear about Israel. One could draw the conclusion that the world is less concerned about Muslims' lives than they are about preventing Israel from protecting its own citizens.
Is that a fair characterization?
I don't think so. I mean, after all, you know, there are plenty of people who are deeply concerned about what's going on in Syria. There are plenty of people who are deeply concerned about what's going on in Iraq. I think the fact is that at last the rest of the world is beginning to realize that the Arab-Israeli conflict, or the Arab-Palestinian conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not a sort of two sides who are more or less equally matched. I mean, this is not, let's say, a war between France and Germany. I mean, some theoretical war between France and Germany. These are people who are, this is a war against an unarmed civilian population population with a few sort of terrorists or freedom fighters running around trying to retaliate.
Do you think that there's merit in that analogy that we just heard, that there was a flourishing greenhouse in Gaza that they simply chose to tear down on their own? I've heard this in various forms. There was a couple of individuals have written in the international press that Gaza had the opportunity to be a new Singapore but chose to ignore that. Do you think that's a realistic analysis?
Well, in 1908 to 9, so 2008 to 9, the Israelis destroyed 15 of the 27 hospitals. They destroyed 800 wells, and they largely destroyed the agricultural sector there was. I mean, you have to remember that this is an extremely small area, 365 square kilometers, which is about half the size of Singapore. I mean, this is not, with a population of nearly 2 million.
All right. Professor Moshe Koppel, let me put to you something that Zbigniew Brzezinski said yesterday. The eminence grise of American foreign policy, a country that has supported Israel to the hilt ever since its inception. And he said this: when Hamas in effect accepted a notion of participation in the Palestinian leadership, it in effect acknowledged the determination of that leadership to seek a real peaceful solution with Israel. That was a real option. They should have persisted in that. Why did Israel not accept the opportunity to negotiate in good faith with a unified Palestinian leadership?
You must be kidding me. As soon as they unified, on the very day that they announced that they unified, Hamas kidnapped three Israeli teenagers and murdered them. Several days later, they began intensive rocketing of
let's not get into a timeline of accusations. But my question to you was, there was an opportunity to negotiate with a leadership that Israel had always said, we can't negotiate with the Palestinians because they're divided. When they became united, Israel again refused to negotiate with them. Why was that?
Hamas has a single purpose, which is to destroy Israel and to kill as many Jews as possible. Those are not people that you can negotiate with. Even now, we can't negotiate a ceasefire with them. Egypt proposed a ceasefire, said both sides will simply stop firing.
Well, that simply isn't true, is it?
Stopped firing for 6 hours, and Hamas continued shooting rockets into Israel.
All right.
What is the purpose of all these tunnels that Hamas is building into Israel? They invested billions in these tunnels. These are not a few freedom fighters, as you put it. These are a massive network of huge tunnels in which they invested billions of dollars. The only purpose of these tunnels is to infiltrate Israel and to murder Jews.
I don't think I use the word a few freedom fighters, but...
no, I mean, well, freedom fighters, you know, your freedom fighter is my terrorist, as it were. So I think this is a gross distortion of the situation. I mean, billions for the Palestinians to construct these tunnels, I very much doubt it. And I mean, you know, I think we have to get away from the idea that this is some sort of conflict between people we might call as equals, in the sense that you have one side with, you know, one of the largest armed forces in the world, and the other side who are sort of virtually defenseless, apart from these homemade rockets which clearly don't work properly.
But very quickly, please address the question I just put to Moshe there. Benjamin Netanyahu always said, we can't negotiate with the Palestinians because they're divided. What would be the point? Then they united. He couldn't negotiate with them because they were terrorists. The professor in Jerusalem just said this is not a tenable situation.
I think it would have been possible. There is also no evidence. I mean, there's no evidence that Hamas killed these poor boys. I mean, this has never been claimed.
It's been claimed, but certainly no evidence has been presented.
No, it's never been. I mean, Hamas has never said we killed these boys, which is what such organisations generally do if they're responsible for something.
A final question to you, Professor Koppel. Again, let me come back to our starting point, and that is the sense that maybe Israel is losing international support. And again, let me quote you, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who's now saying, from an American perspective, which is quite extraordinary, we ought to make it very clear that this is a course of action of which we thoroughly disapprove. The rest of the international community should take steps of legitimizing Palestinian aspirations, perhaps in the UN. What do you think of that?
Well, the United States is a great friend of Israel and always has been, but certainly no thanks to the likes of Zbigniew Brzezinski. We will survive and flourish without the Brzezinskis of the world.
And finally to you, do you see a way out of this?
It's very difficult to see a way out of it unless the United States threatens some sort of withdrawing of supplies.
Is that likely?
I mean, I doubt it. I mean, I think one thing I would like to say is that really what the Israelis must start thinking, that it is not who they are, but what they do that gains them international censure.
All right, there we're going to have to leave it. Moshe Koppel in Jerusalem, thank you for being with us. Peter Sluglet here in Singapore, thank you. And thank you for watching. That's it for tonight.